Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab. Let's begin this one. James Brennan measured his life in small certainties. Morning coffee at 6:15, black with 1 sugar. The drive to his architectural firm took exactly 18 minutes if he caught the lights right. His daughter's laugh when he came through the door at 6:30 each evening. His wife Laura's habit of reading with one leg tucked under her on the couch. These were the pillars that held up his world, unremarkable and essential as oxygen. The cracks started forming on a Tuesday in October. James had built his career designing spaces for other people to live in, office buildings, mostly with the occasional residential project that paid well enough to justify the hassle. At 42, he'd achieved what his father would have called comfortable, a 4-bedroom colonial in a neighborhood where people still waved to each other, a daughter named Sophie who just turned 7, in a marriage that had weathered 14 years without major storms. He wasn't a man who expected drama. Drama was for other people's lives, the kind of stories you read about and felt grateful weren't yours. Laura had left Sunday afternoon for her mother's place in Millbrook, 3 hours north. Her stepfather Hugh had called Friday night, something about Barb having a bad fall, maybe a broken hip. Laura had the phone on speaker while folding laundry, and James heard the tremor in Hugh's voice, the practiced concern of a man who'd married into the family 5 years ago and still performed thoughtfulness like a role he'd studied. "You should go," James had said, though the timing was poor. He had a presentation Thursday that would determine whether his firm landed the Riverside development contract, 6 months of work condensed into a 40-minute pitch. "I can handle things here. Sophie and I will have a boys' weekend." Well, a boy and girl weekend. Laura had smiled, the kind that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You sure? I know you're slammed with work. Your mom needs you. We'll be fine." She'd kissed him before leaving, a real kiss, not the autopilot peck of married routine. He remembered that detail later, turned it over in his mind like a suspicious coin. Had she known something? Had there been a message in that kiss he'd failed to decode? Monday morning, Sophie had woken up with a fever. Nothing serious, just enough to keep her home from school and to shuffle James's carefully ordered day. He'd called his mother, who lived 20 minutes away and treated grandparent duty like an Olympic sport. She arrived at 8 with a bag of activities and a container of homemade soup. "You focus on your work," she'd said, already setting up a puzzle on the living room floor. "We'll have a grand time, won't we, sweetheart?" Sophie had nodded, clutching the stuffed elephant she'd had since infancy, her dark hair matted with sleep. James had kissed her forehead, still warm but not dangerously so, and driven to work with the radio off, his mind already cycling through presentation notes. The Electrician had been scheduled for months. The house was old enough to have character and problems in equal measure, and the outlet in Sophie's room had started sparking 2 weeks ago, a genuine fire hazard that couldn't wait. Morris Walton came, recommended by 3 different neighbors, a slight man in his 50s who showed up in a van that had seen better decades. James had let him in that morning before Sophie woke up, shown him to the bedroom, and left for work. Standard protocol. Morris had his number if there were issues. The call came at 2:47 p.m. James was in the conference room, reviewing slides with his partner Greg Whitehead, when his phone lit up with the unfamiliar number. "Mr. Brennan?" The voice was wrong, tight, almost stareless. "This is Morris Walton. I'm at your house. I need you to come home. Right now." James felt his stomach drop in the particular way it does when the universe announces something has gone wrong. "Is there a fire?" "Is the house?" "No fire. Just, you need to see this." I opened up the wall behind the outlet, and there's a pause, the sound of breathing. "Sir, there's something inside the wall. I don't know how to explain it, but it's not good." "What do you mean, something?" "Equipment. Cameras. Wires running through the wall cavity. Professional installation. Someone's been watching this room, recording it." The conference room lost focus. Greg was still talking, something about the third quarter projections, but the words were just sounds now, disconnected from meaning. "I'm coming home," James said. "Don't touch anything else. Don't, just wait for me." He made it to his car, without remembering the elevator ride or the walk through the parking garage. The 18-minute drive took 11. He parked crooked in the driveway and found Morris sitting on the front steps, his tool bag beside him like a witness. "I'm sorry," Morris said. "I wish I'd found anything else." Sophie's room was on the second floor, painted lavender at her insistence last spring, filled with the debris of childhood. Books, toys, a half-finished art project on her desk. The outlet cover lay on the floor, and the section of drywall Morris had removed was propped against the baseboard. James looked into the wall cavity and understood that his life had just split into before and after. The camera was small, professional grade, the kind you couldn't buy at a consumer electronics store. It was angled to cover the entire room, the bed, the desk, the door. The wiring ran down through the wall, disappearing into the crawl space. There was a second camera mounted higher, a backup or a different angle. Everything was dust-free, recently installed, or meticulously maintained. "There's more," Morris said quietly. "I checked behind the other outlet, near the closet. Same setup. And I found this." He held up a small plastic case, the kind that might hold SD cards. It was tucked into the insulation. I didn't open it. James took it with hands that didn't feel like his own. The case was labeled with a date, 3 months ago. Inside were 4 micro SD cards, each marked with date ranges spanning the past 18 months. The room tilted. James sat down hard on Sophie's bed, the stuffed elephant watching him with button eyes. "Should I call the police?" Morris asked. James looked at the cameras, at the cards in his hand, at the hole in the wall that had revealed a horror he couldn't yet process. "Call the FBI," he whispered. Morris made the call. James sat motionless, his mind fracturing into 1,000 directions at once. Who had access to this house? Who had the skill to install this equipment? When had it been done? The questions piled up like a car crash in slow motion, each one smashing into the next. Sophie was at Barb's house. The thought detonated in his chest. He stood up so fast the room spun. "I have to get my daughter." "Sir, the FBI will want to." "I don't care what they want. My daughter is 3 hours away with people I don't." He stopped, the sentence dying in his throat. "People I don't what? Trust? Know well enough?" The stepfather, Hugh Ames, had been in the family for 5 years. Pleasant enough, quiet, worked in IT, consulting, or something equally vague. He'd helped them move furniture last spring. He'd given Sophie a bicycle for her birthday. James's phone was in his hand, Laura's number on the screen. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. He tried again. Same result. "Morris, stay here. The FBI will send someone. Tell them I went to get my daughter, and I'll call them from the road." He was in the car before Morris could respond, tires screeching as he reversed out of the driveway. The speed limit on the highway was 65. James held it at 90, his hands welded to the steering wheel. He called Laura 6 more times. Voicemail. He tried his mother-in-law's landline. It rang and rang and rang. He called Laura again. Nothing. The drive to Millbrook was a blur of asphalt and rising panic. Every worst-case scenario his mind could generate played on loop. Sophie in that room, unaware of the cameras. Sophie sleeping, changing clothes, existing in a space that someone had weaponized against her. How long had the cameras been there? The SD cards went back 18 months. 18 months of recorded footage. Of his daughter. His phone rang at the 2-hour mark. An unknown number. He answered without thinking. "Mr. Brennan, this is Special Agent Carrie Gallagher with the FBI. I'm at your residence now. We need you to come back immediately. My daughter is in Millbrook with my wife's family. I'm getting her. I'm bringing her home. Sir, we need to establish a timeline before you. Someone put cameras in my daughter's bedroom. Multiple cameras. Professional installation. You want a timeline? Find out who did this while I make sure my child is safe." He hung up and threw the phone onto the passenger seat. It rang again immediately. He ignored it. Barb's house was a renovated farmhouse on 6 acres, the kind of property that screamed rustic charm to people who'd never had to maintain it. Hugh had bought it as a fixer-upper when he'd married Barb, spent 3 years turning it into something from a magazine spread. Laura had been impressed. James had thought it was too much house for 2 people. He pulled into the gravel driveway at 6:43 p.m., the sun already setting behind the tree line. Laura's car was parked near the garage. The lights were on in the house, warm and inviting through the windows. Everything looked normal. Everything looked fine. James knew better now. Normal was just a mask that terrible things wore. He didn't knock, just opened the front door and called out, "Laura." She appeared from the kitchen, surprise flickering across her face. "James? Where are you? We weren't expecting you until." "Where's Sophie?" "She's upstairs with Mom." "There, James, what's wrong?" "You look. Get her. Now. We're leaving." Laura's expression shifted from surprise to concern. "What happened? Is someone hurt?" "Get Sophie. Please." The edge in his voice must have convinced her. She disappeared up the stairs, and James heard voices, the questioning tone of his mother-in-law, Sophie's lighter reply. Then footsteps, and Sophie appeared on the landing, still in her pajamas, clutching the elephant. "Daddy!" She ran down the stairs and into his arms, and he held her so tightly she squeaked. She was warm and solid and real, and he was here, and she was safe. Except she wasn't safe. She hadn't been safe for 18 months. "We're going home, baby," he said into her hair. "But Grandma said I could stay for dinner. She's making lasagna." Another time, he looked up at Laura, who was halfway down the stairs, her mother behind her. Barb looked worried, her arm in a sling from the fall. And behind Barb, emerging from the hallway, was Hugh. Hugh Ames was 58, with the kind of face that inspired confidence. Open features, easy smile, the silver hair of a man aging well. He wore khakis and a button-down shirt, glasses perched on his nose. He looked like someone's favorite teacher, someone's trusted advisor. He looked like a monster wearing people clothes. "James," Hugh said pleasantly. "This is a surprise. Everything all right?" James stared at him, at this man in whose house his daughter had been sleeping, and felt something cold and murderous unfold in his chest. He didn't know yet, couldn't prove yet, but standing there, holding Sophie, watching Hugh's performance of concern, he knew with the certainty of bone-deep instinct. "We have to go," James said, his voice flat. "Family emergency." He carried Sophie to the car, strapped her into the booster seat while Laura protested from the porch, Barb calling out questions, Hugh standing in the doorway with that pleasant, concerned expression that James now recognized as a lie. Laura got in the passenger seat, buckled herself with sharp, angry movements. "You want to tell me what's happening? You're scaring me." James started the car. In the rearview mirror, he could see Hugh watching them leave, one hand raised in a goodbye wave. "I'll explain on the drive," James said. "We need to get Sophie home first." But he knew, even as he said it, that there was no safe home to return to. The house with the cameras in the walls, the place where his daughter had been watched and recorded and violated, that wasn't home anymore. That was a crime scene. And somewhere behind him, in that perfect farmhouse, was the man who had turned his daughter's bedroom into a hunting ground. The certainty settled over James like a weight. Hugh Ames had done this. Hugh, with his IT background and access to their house during family visits. Hugh, who had helped install Sophie's new bookshelf last summer, who had been alone in her room for 20 minutes while James and Laura had unloaded groceries. Hugh, who had married into their family and positioned himself as the helpful stepfather, the trusted figure. James's hands tightened on the steering wheel. In the back seat, Sophie hummed to herself, oblivious. In the passenger seat, Laura stared at him, waiting for an explanation that would shatter her world. There were cameras in Sophie's room, James said quietly, hidden in the walls. An electrician found them today. Laura's face went white. "What? That's impossible." "Who would?" "I don't know yet." A lie. He knew. He just couldn't prove it. But the FBI is involved now. We need to get home and figure this out. Behind them, Millbrook disappeared into the darkness, and James drove toward a future he couldn't yet see, knowing only that the man in the farmhouse would pay for what he'd done, however long it took, whatever it cost. Hugh Ames had made one critical mistake. He'd left James Brennan's daughter alive to rescue. And James was going to make sure that mistake haunted him until his last breath. The FBI set up in James's living room like it was a command center for a military operation. Special Agent Carrie Gallagher was a woman in her 40s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She sat across from James at the dining table while technicians photographed every inch of Sophie's room, bagged evidence, and turned his house into a catalog of violations. Sophie was at his mother's house, blessedly ignorant of why Daddy's house was full of strangers with badges. Laura sat beside him, her hands wrapped around a coffee mug she hadn't touched in an hour. She'd cried in the car, then gone silent, her mind trying to process the impossible. The cameras were professionally installed, Gallagher said, reviewing notes on her tablet. Whoever did this had technical knowledge and access to your home. The SD cards you found contain approximately 400 hours of footage. We're analyzing it now, but I need to ask, who has been in your daughter's room in the past 2 years? James recited the list. Babysitters, his mother, Laura's mother and Hugh, a contractor who'd fixed a ceiling leak, Sophie's friends and their parents during playdates. We'll need to interview everyone on that list, Gallagher said. But I want to be clear about something, Mr. Brennan. Whoever did this, they likely have copies of that footage. The cameras had wireless capability. They were streaming somewhere, possibly to cloud storage. Laura made a sound like she'd been hit. We're working with our cyber division to trace the network trail, Gallagher continued. These things leave digital fingerprints. We'll find them. How long will that take? James asked. Could be days. Could be weeks. This person was careful. James nodded slowly, his mind already working through scenarios, possibilities, the architecture of revenge. What happens to the footage you recovered? It's evidence. We'll review it to determine the extent of the crime and identify any victims beyond your daughter. Victims, Laura whispered. My baby was a victim. Gallagher's expression softened fractionally. Mrs. Brennan, I know this is. You don't know anything, Laura said, her voice shaking. You can't possibly know what this feels like. She was right. No one could know. James watched his wife fall apart in slow motion and felt his own grief calcify into something harder, something useful. The FBI left at midnight, taking with them boxes of evidence and a promise to update him daily. The house felt violated in their absence, every room contaminated by knowledge. James stood in Sophie's doorway, looking at the holes in the walls, the stripped outlet covers, the fingerprint powder on every surface. This had been her sanctuary. Someone had poisoned it. His phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize. This is Agent Gallagher. Preliminary analysis shows the cameras were active for approximately 19 months. Installation likely occurred during a period when the house was empty. Do you have any trips or extended absences in that time frame? James scrolled through his calendar, his memory. 19 months ago would be March of last year. They'd gone to Florida for spring break, 5 days at Disney World. The house had been empty, except Hugh had offered to check on it, water the plants, collect mail. Hugh, who had a key. James's hands started shaking. He texted back, we were in Florida March 15th to 20th last year. My mother-in-law's husband, Hugh Ames, had access to the house. The response came quickly. We'll look into him. Don't do anything yet. Let us handle this. Don't do anything yet. As if James was supposed to sit in his violated house and wait for the slow machinery of justice to grind through its process. As if the man who had recorded his daughter was going to just sit tight while the FBI built their case. James knew better. He was smart. IT professional, technical expertise, careful enough to run this operation for 19 months without detection. He would have contingencies, backup plans. And right now, he was in Millbrook with Barb, playing the concerned stepfather, probably wiping drives and covering tracks. The FBI was good, but they had rules, procedures, warrants they needed to obtain. They would get Hugh eventually, build an ironclad case, put him away for decades. Eventually wasn't good enough. James went to his office and opened his laptop. If Hugh Ames thought he could violate James's daughter and then hide behind lawyers and legal process, he fundamentally misunderstood who he was dealing with. James Brennan designed buildings. He understood structure, systems, the hidden architecture of how things worked. He understood load-bearing elements and points of failure. He understood how to build something that looked solid from the outside while being hollow at its core. He could apply those same principles to destroying a man. The first step was information. James created a new email account using a VPN, then started researching. Hugh Ames, age 58, IT consultant for a firm called Whitehead Solutions. Married to Barbara McIntosh for 5 years. Previous marriage ended in divorce 12 years ago. No children from either marriage. No children. The phrase stuck in James's mind like a thorn. Why target Sophie? Was she the first? The only? Or had there been others? A trail of victims stretching back through Hugh's life? James dug deeper, searching public records, social media, anything that would reveal the man behind the mask. He found a LinkedIn profile, professional and bland. References to projects, clients, the usual corporate language that meant nothing. Hugh's Facebook was private, but his previous wife, Nicole Black, had a public profile. James found her listed in Colorado, remarried to someone named Blake Shoemaker. Her privacy settings were loose enough that he could see friend lists, photos going back years. He scrolled through them, looking for anything involving Hugh. He found it in an album from 8 years ago, before the divorce. A birthday party for Nicole, Hugh smiling beside her, and in the background, barely visible, a young girl, maybe 10 years old, standing apart from the group, her body language screaming discomfort. The caption identified her as Blake's niece visiting for the weekend. James stared at that photo for a long time, at the girl's expression, at Hugh positioned in the frame where he could see her. It proved nothing. It suggested everything. He screenshotted the image, saved it to his encrypted drive, and kept digging. By 3 a.m., he had a file. Hugh's employment history, addresses, social connections, financial records pulled from public databases. He had the name and number of Hugh's ex-wife. He had the names of 3 other children who had been in Hugh's orbit during the marriage. Nieces, nephews, children of friends. He had threads to pull, and pull he would, until Hugh's entire life unraveled. The FBI would build their case. James would build something else. A trap so comprehensive that Hugh Ames would beg for the mercy of federal prison before it was over. Laura found him at dawn, still at the computer, surrounded by printed documents and highlighted notes. "James!" Her voice was hoarse. "Did you sleep?" "No." She looked at the papers, at his face, at the cold determination in his eyes. "What are you doing?" "Research." The FBI said. "I know what they said." He turned to face her. "Laura, the cameras were installed during our Florida trip. Hugh had access. He had the keys, the time, the technical knowledge. You think..." She couldn't finish the sentence. "I know it was him." "Then the FBI will. The FBI will take months. They'll need warrants, evidence chains, court approvals. And Hugh will know they're coming. He'll lawyer up, destroy evidence, maybe disappear." James stood, his body stiff from hours in the chair. "I'm not waiting for that. What are you going to do?" "Whatever I have to." Laura stared at him, and he saw the exact moment she understood. His wife, kind, gentle Laura, who cried at sad movies and donated to every charity that asked, looked at her husband and saw someone new, someone capable of things she'd never imagined. "Be careful," she whispered. It was the only permission he needed. James took a week off work, telling Greg he had a family emergency, which was true in the most devastating sense. He spent the days in a rental car, driving routes that couldn't be traced to him, making calls on burner phones, building the foundation of what came next. First, he contacted Nicole Black. She answered on the 3rd ring, suspicious of the unknown number. "Hello. Mrs. Shoemaker, my name is Guy Yates. I'm a private investigator looking into Hugh Ames regarding a case involving children. I understand you were married to him. I'd like to ask you some questions if you have time." A long pause. "Then what kind of case?" "The kind that involves hidden cameras and inappropriate recordings. I can't say more on the phone, but if you're willing to meet, I can explain." Another pause, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice was different, harder, haunted. "When and where?" They met at a coffee shop in Denver, James having flown out on a red-eye and rented a car under his false identity. Nicole was 45, with a wary look of someone who'd survived something terrible and knew it could happen again. "Hugh and I were married for 6 years, she said, stirring coffee she wouldn't drink. "The divorce was complicated. I couldn't prove what I suspected, but I knew something was wrong. The way he was around children. Too interested. Too available to babysit, to help with school events. I thought I was paranoid." "You weren't paranoid." She looked up sharply. "You found something." Multiple cameras in my 7-year-old daughter's bedroom. 19 months of footage. Professional installation. James kept his voice level clinical. If he let the emotion in, he'd shatter. Hugh had access to my house. The timeline matches. I need to know if there were others. Nicole's hands started shaking. My niece. Blake's niece, Cassie. She was 10 when she stayed with us one summer. After she left, she changed. Stopped talking to us, avoided family gatherings. I asked Hugh if something happened, and he said she was just going through a phase. I believed him. Tears tracked down her face. I believed him because I didn't want it to be true. Is Cassie, would she talk to me? She's 19 now, in college. I don't know if. Nicole stopped, wiped her eyes. What are you going to do? To Hugh. James met her gaze. Whatever it takes to make sure he never hurts another child. The police are involved, but the system is slow, and he's smart. I need to be smarter. Nicole nodded slowly. Cassie's number is in my phone. I'll text you. And Mr. Yates? Or whoever you really are. Make him suffer. For all of them. Make him suffer. James flew home with 2 more names. Children who had been in Hugh's orbit during the marriage, both now adults, both potentially carrying the same scars as Cassie. He had testimony waiting to be collected, evidence that would paint a picture spanning decades. But testimony wasn't enough. Hugh could still run, still hide behind lawyers, still find ways to slip through the cracks of justice. James needed something more final. The idea came to him while reviewing the FBI's technical report on the cameras. The devices had been connected to a private server, likely in Hugh's possession, with the footage backed up to encrypted cloud storage. The server would be the key, physical evidence, hard drives full of crimes, enough to bury Hugh forever. But more than that, the server represented Hugh's control, his archive, his power. James was going to take that power and use it to destroy him. Agent Gallagher called on the 8th day. We've identified Hugh Ames as a person of interest. We're preparing warrants for his home and devices. It'll take another week, maybe 2. That's too long. Mr. Brennan, I understand your frustration, but he knows you're coming. Someone like Hugh, he'll have tripwires, alerts. The moment you start filing warrants, he'll know. We're being careful. Not careful enough. James paused. What if I could get you into his house? No warrants needed. An invitation. That's not how this works. Agent Gallagher, Hugh Ames has been doing this for years. Maybe decades. If he destroys that server, how many other victims lose their chance at justice? Silence on the line. Then were you proposing? A family visit. My wife wants to see her mother. Make sure she's recovering from the fall. Hugh won't suspect anything. While we're there, I can confirm where he keeps his equipment, maybe even get you physical access. Mr. Brennan, if you're thinking about taking evidence without a warrant, I'm thinking about my daughter and every other child he's hurt. You do this by the book, and he walks. You let me help, and we bury him. Another long pause. I can't officially sanction this. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to be ready when I call. If you contaminate evidence. I know what I'm doing. A lie. He had no idea what he was doing. But he was doing it anyway. Call me when you have something. Gallagher said finally. And Brennan? Don't do anything stupid. James hung up and dialed Laura. Tell your mother we're coming for a visit this weekend. Tell her we want to help with her recovery. Make it sound natural. James. Trust me. A beat. Then I do. That's what scares me. Saturday morning, they drove to Millbrook. Sophie was still at James's mother's house, told that Mommy and Daddy needed to help Grandma Barb with some heavy lifting. Laura sat rigid in the passenger seat, her hands clenched in her lap. What's the plan? She asked as they crossed into the Millbrook County line. I'm going to find Hugh's server. Get proof of what he's done. Then I'm going to destroy him. Ow! James looked at his wife, this woman he'd loved for 14 years, who had given him a daughter and a life worth protecting. Do you really want to know? She considered this, watching the trees blur past. No, I just want him gone. Then trust me to make that happen. They pulled into Barb's driveway at noon. Hugh came out to greet them, all smiles and concern, the perfect stepfather-in-law. James shook his hand and felt nothing but cold calculation. The trap was set. Now came the spring. Barb's hip was healing well, though she moved with a cane and needed help with stairs. Laura fussed over her mother, while James offered to help Hugh with some property maintenance. A convenient excuse to scope out the house. Hugh accepted with enthusiasm, clearly pleased to have male company. "There's a tree branch that needs cutting near the garage," Hugh said, leading James outside. "And I've been meaning to organize the basement. 2 pairs of hands would make it go faster." The basement. Perfect. They worked for an hour, James hauling boxes and making small talk while his eyes cataloged every detail. The basement was finished, half storage and half office space. Hugh's desk sat in the corner, 3 monitors dark, a tower computer humming beneath it. Beside the desk was a locked cabinet, industrial grade, the kind used for server equipment. "You've got quite the setup down here," James said casually. "Remote work requires good infrastructure," he replied. "I do consulting for firms all over the country. Need the bandwidth and security." Security. James filed that away. Hugh was paranoid, which made sense for a man hiding terrible secrets. They finished around 3 p.m. Laura had made lunch, and they sat around the dining table like a normal family, passing dishes and making conversation that felt like walking on glass. James watched Hugh interact with Barb, tender and attentive, the devoted husband. The mask was perfect. After lunch, Laura took Barb upstairs for a nap. James excused himself to use the bathroom, then quietly descended to the basement. The locked cabinet wasn't a problem. James had tools in his car, had prepared for this. He knelt beside it, working the lock with a tension wrench and pick, muscle memory from misspent youth coming back. The mechanism yielded in 45 seconds. Inside were 2 server towers, industrial hard drives, a network switch, and what looked like a backup power supply. Professional-grade equipment, nothing consumer level. James photographed everything with his phone, then carefully examined the servers. External drives attached to the towers, labeled with dates and initials. He recognized SB on one, Sophie Brennan. His hands clenched into fists. "Breathe. Stay focused." He photographed the serial numbers, the configuration, the network cables. Then he noticed something else, a small box tucked in the back, like a portable hard drive, but more sophisticated. It had a wireless antenna and LED indicators. James pulled it out carefully. The label read Mobile Backup Auto Sync. This was Hugh's insurance policy. Automatic backup of the servers to a remote location, probably cloud storage with military-grade encryption. Even if the FBI seized the servers, Hugh would still have copies, unless someone destroyed the source before it could sync. James pocketed the device, relocked the cabinet, and went back upstairs. Hugh was in the kitchen, washing dishes. "All good?" he asked pleasantly. "All good," James replied. They left at 6, Laura promising to visit again soon. Hugh hugged her goodbye, shook James's hand, waved from the doorway as they drove away. James watched him in the rearview mirror until the house disappeared from view. "Did you find it?" Laura asked quietly. "I found everything." He called Agent Gallagher from the car, using the burner phone. "I have photos of Hugh's server setup. He's got everything in his basement, locked cabinet, professional equipment. And there's a mobile backup device with auto-sync capability." "You took the device?" "I took photos. The device is still there." "A lie, but necessary. You need to move fast. If he realizes someone was in that cabinet, he'll wipe everything. We'll execute the warrant Monday morning. I'll coordinate with local PD. Monday is 2 days away. That's the soonest we can move." "I'm sorry, but..." James hung up. Monday was too late. He would notice the device was missing, would realize someone had accessed the cabinet. He'd panic, destroy evidence, run. James needed Hugh to make a different choice. A worse choice. He spent Sunday preparing. He created an email account in Hugh's name, used the photos of the server serial numbers to register the equipment on various online forums where predators shared resources. He posted detailed specifications, offered to trade files, made Hugh aims visible to every law enforcement agency that monitored those spaces. Then he sent an email to Hugh from an anonymous account. "I know what you've been doing. I have copies of your files. If you want them to stay private, we need to talk. Tomorrow, 8 p.m., the old quarry off Route 47. Come alone, or everyone sees what you are." It was crude, obvious bait. But James was betting on Hugh's arrogance. his belief that he was smarter than everyone else. A blackmailer was a problem Hugh could solve, either with money or violence. Hugh wouldn't call the police, he couldn't risk it. He'd show up, thinking he could manage the situation. And James would be waiting. Monday evening, James told Laura he had to meet with a client. She didn't ask questions. They'd gone past the point where questions mattered. He drove to the quarry, an abandoned industrial site 20 miles outside Millbrook, and parked behind a derelict building. The quarry was a bowl of crumbling stone and stagnant water, surrounded by rusted equipment and warning signs. Perfect privacy, no witnesses. James positioned himself behind a concrete barrier with a view of the access road, the mobile backup device on the ground beside him. Hugh's car appeared at 7:55 p.m., headlights cutting through the dusk. James watched him park, get out, look around nervously. Hugh was armed. James could see the outline of a holster under his jacket. Smart. Prepared. Not smart enough. James waited until Hugh was 20 feet from the car, then stood up. Hugh. Hugh spun, hand going to his weapon. He stopped when he saw James, confusion flickering across his face. James? What are you? I found your cameras, James said, his voice flat. All of them. In my daughter's room. Hugh's expression cycled through emotions, shock, calculation, then something like resignation. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. The FBI knows too. They're executing a warrant on your house tomorrow morning. They'll find the servers, the backup drives, every sick thing you've recorded. You can't prove anything. I don't have to prove it. Your equipment will do that. James held up the mobile backup device. Like this. Automatic sync to the cloud. Even if you destroy the servers, this little box keeps uploading. Hugh's hand tightened on his weapon. Give that to me. Why? So you can delete your archive? Hide the evidence. You don't understand. You can't. I understand perfectly. You're a predator. You married into my family, got close to my daughter, and turned her bedroom into your own private hunting ground. James's voice was ice. How many others, Hugh? How many children before Sophie? It's not. You don't know what it's like to need the... Stop. James cut him off, disgust flooding through him. I didn't come here to listen to you justify yourself. I came to give you a choice. Hugh's eyes narrowed. What choice? You can run. Leave tonight. Try to disappear before the FBI shows up. Or you can end it here. One bullet, quick and clean, and it's over. You want me to kill myself? I want you to do the one decent thing you're capable of. Because if you run, if you make me chase you, I will find you. And what happens then will be much worse. Hugh laughed, a broken sound. You think you scare me? You're just some architect, some suburban dad playing vigilante. You don't have it in you. James didn't respond. He just watched. Hugh pulled his weapon, aimed it at James. Give me the device, or I'll shoot you and take it. Then shoot. James didn't move. But know this. Agent Kerry Gallagher has photos of your entire setup. The warrant is already signed. Even if you kill me and destroy this device, they're coming for you tomorrow. Your only choice is how this ends. In prison, in headlines, with your name synonymous with monster. Or here, tonight, quick. Hugh's hand trembled. You're bluffing. Call me at 8 a.m. tomorrow. See if I answer. They stood there in the gathering dark, the quarry silent around them. James could see Hugh thinking, calculating odds, looking for an exit that didn't exist. This was the trap. Not physical restraints or locked doors, but the simple mathematics of consequence. Every choice Hugh made from here led to ruin. Finally, Hugh lowered the weapon. What do you get out of this? Revenge. Justice, James said. For Sophie. For every child you hurt. She'll never know. Your daughter, she'll never remember. That's not the point. James's control finally cracked, anger flooding through. The point is you stole something from her. From all of them. You took their safety, their innocence, and you weaponized it for your own gratification. And you're not going to walk away from that. Not in a prison where you'll get therapy and appeals and maybe parole in 20 years. You're going to end, Hugh. Tonight. Hugh looked at him, really looked, and saw the truth. James Brennan meant every word. This wasn't negotiation. It was execution. And if I refuse? Hugh asked quietly. Then I call the FBI right now. You get arrested, processed, jailed. Your trial will be public. Every detail of what you've done will be in newspapers, online, everywhere. Barb will know. Laura will know. Everyone you've ever met will know exactly what you are. And in prison, men like you don't last long. Inmates have a special hatred for predators who hurt children. Hugh's face had gone pale. You're giving me a way out. I'm giving you what you deserve. A choice between bad and worse. The silence stretched. Somewhere in the quarry, water dripped into water. Hugh looked at the weapon in his hand, at James, at the device that represented his entire archive of crimes. My wife, Hugh said finally. Barb. She doesn't. She never knew. I know. Laura will make sure she's okay. Hugh nodded slowly. His shoulders sagged. I'm sorry. For what that's worth. It's worth nothing. I know. Hugh raised the weapon again, but this time he aimed it at himself. Tell Sophie. Tell her. I'm not telling my daughter anything about you. As far as she'll know, you never existed. Hugh closed his eyes. The shot was very loud in the stillness. James stood there for a long moment, looking at the body, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction. Then he picked up Hugh's weapon with a cloth, wiped it clean of his own prints, and pressed it back into Hugh's hand. He took the mobile backup device and Hugh's phone, pocketed both, and walked back to his car. He called Gallagher from the road. Hugh Ames is at the old quarry off Route 47. He's dead. Suicide. I think he knew you were coming for him. Mr. Brennan, where are you? I'm at home. I was never at the quarry. I was here all evening with my wife. James, execute your warrant. Seize the servers. You'll find enough evidence to close cases going back decades. There are victims. Hugh's ex-wife can give you names. Make sure they get justice. Did you? I was at home, James repeated, all evening, with my wife. We had dinner, watched a movie. You can check our credit card receipts if you want. He hung up before she could respond. Laura was waiting when he got home, sitting in the dark living room. Is it done? She asked. It's done. She nodded, asking nothing more. They sat together in silence until the police scanner James had bought started crackling with reports of a body found at the quarry. Local PD responding. FBI en route. The next morning, FBI teams executed the warrant on Hugh's house. They found the servers, the drives, the archive spanning years. They found evidence of 14 victims, children who ranged in age from 6 to 13, including Sophie. Cassie confirmed her abuse. 2 other children came forward. Hugh's ex-wife provided testimony about suspicious behavior during their marriage. The story hit the news. IT consultant found dead, suspected of multiple child abuse cases. The FBI praised the investigation, mentioned an anonymous tip that led to the discovery. Hugh was painted as a monster, his death almost an afterthought to the revelation of his crimes. Barb was devastated, her world crumbling. Laura stayed with her for 2 weeks, helping her process, grieve, and eventually accept the truth. The farmhouse went on the market. Barb moved to a smaller place, closer to Laura, somewhere without memories of Hugh. Agent Gallagher visited James a month later. They sat in his office, not the violated house. He'd sold that and bought a new place across town, somewhere Sophie could sleep without cameras in the walls. The case is closed, Gallagher said. Hugh Ames was the perpetrator. We've identified all the victims, offered resources, therapy. The recordings are being destroyed as evidence is no longer needed for prosecution. Good. There's just one thing. She looked at him steadily. Hugh's weapon. The ballistics were interesting. Angles suggested suicide, but there were some inconsistencies. People are messy when they kill themselves. True. And the coroner ruled it's suicide. But I wonder, Mr. Brennan, if you happened to be at that quarry. I was home. With my wife. All evening. Gallagher nodded slowly. Right. Well, however it happened, Hugh Ames isn't going to hurt any more children. That's what matters. That's what matters, James agreed. She left without another word. James never heard from the FBI again. 6 months later, Sophie started 2nd grade in their new house. She had nightmares sometimes, wake up crying for reasons she couldn't articulate. James and Laura got her into therapy, a specialist who worked with trauma cases. The therapist said Sophie was resilient. That with support she'd heal. James hoped that was true. He'd done everything he could to protect her, to remove the threat, to ensure Hugh Ames would never touch another child. But the scars remained, invisible and deep. He'd become someone new in that quarry, someone capable of looking at another human being and demanding they end their own life. Someone who could stand there, cold and unmoved, while a man put a gun to his own head. Laura noticed the change. They didn't talk about it directly, but it lived between them, the knowledge of what James had done, what he was capable of doing for his family. "Do you regret it?" she asked one night, after Sophie had fallen asleep. James thought about the question, about Hugh's victims, the children who'd been freed from ongoing abuse when Hugh died, about the evidence that had been recovered, the cases that had been closed, about his daughter, sleeping peacefully in a room without cameras, in a house Hugh Ames had never entered. "No," he said, "I don't regret it at all." And he didn't. Hugh Ames had made his choices, had built his archive of horrors one child at a time. James had simply presented him with a bill, demanded payment in the only currency that mattered. The world was cleaner without Hugh Ames in it. That was the truth James lived with, the certainty that let him sleep at night. He'd protected his daughter. He'd avenged her violation. And if that made him a vigilante, a killer, someone who'd stepped outside the law, so be it. He could live with that label if it meant Sophie was safe. 3 years later, James stood in his office, looking at the architectural plans for a new community center that would include spaces for child advocacy programs. His firm had won the contract, and James had personally overseen every detail: security systems, sight lines, privacy measures designed to protect rather than violate. It was his way of building something good from the darkness, of using what he'd learned to help others. The center would serve hundreds of children, offer resources to families, provide sanctuary to those who needed it. Hugh Ames had tried to destroy James's daughter. Instead, he'd created something far more dangerous. A father who knew exactly how far he'd go to protect his child, and who'd proven he had the will to do it. Sophie was 10 now, thriving, laughing, mostly free of the shadows. She didn't remember much about the cameras, the FBI, the time before they'd moved. That was as it should be. Let the darkness stay with James. Let his daughter have light. He picked up his phone and called Laura. "Hey, I'm heading home. Wanting to pick up Sophie from soccer." "That will be great. I love you." "I love you too." He hung up, gathered his things, and walked out into the afternoon sunshine. Somewhere in the world were other men like Hugh, other predators hunting children. James couldn't stop them all, but he'd stopped one, and if another ever threatened his family, he'd do it again without hesitation. That was the man he'd become, the father who'd looked into his daughter's wall and seen horror, who'd driven through the night to rescue her, who tracked down the monster responsible and made him pay. It was enough. It had to be enough. James Brennan drove home to his wife and daughter, to the life he'd fought to preserve, and didn't look back at the ghosts he'd left in the quarry. They couldn't touch him. They couldn't touch Sophie. That was all that mattered. That was everything. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.